Let me say something that the healthcare system will never say out loud to you. If you have been sick for months or years, and if you have done everything that you were told, the tests, the appointments, the prescriptions, maybe even the surgeries, and you're still here without answers, that's not bad luck. And it's not because you missed something. It's not because you didn't advocate hard enough. And if you're still sick, it's not even an accident. And once you understand why, you will never look at your medical care the same way again. You see, most people are operating under a very reasonable assumption that if I just keep going, if I just keep showing up, if I just explain myself more clearly, if I just find the right doctor, eventually someone will connect the dots. And that belief is what keeps smart, proactive people trapped the longest. Because effort feels like progress. Appointments feel like progress. Tests feel like progress. Referrals to another specialist can feel like progress. But progress is not just movement. Progress is direction. And most people are doing a lot of moving without ever changing direction. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The U.S. healthcare system is not designed to investigate complex cross-system problems. But you probably already know that, don't you? So, what is it designed to do? Well, to provide care and to have your insurance company pay the bill. That's where it gets sticky. Because I think we can all agree that doctors and nurses and everybody else has to get paid, and there are hard costs associated to having a clinic or a hospital open. Okay, fair enough. The problem comes in when we look at what insurance companies actually pay your providers to do. And that largely falls into 4 buckets: appointments, prescriptions, tests, surgeries. So what that means is that those are the tools that your provider has in their toolbox to provide you medical care and keep the lights on. But what you didn't hear there is that there is no built-in mechanism for someone to stop, zoom out, and ask, how does all of this connect? There's no billing code for looking at the big picture. Let me say this another way. Your insurance company won't pay your doctor to stop and think a while about what's wrong with you. They only pay your doctor to do something about it. And so when you have something that is rare or just simply doesn't fit neatly into one specialty, one organ system, or one test result, it doesn't get solved. It just gets passed along to the next person. And this is how people end up on what I call the medical merry-go-round. You go to a doctor and they rule out what they can rule out quickly. They send you somewhere else, maybe with a prescription along the way to see if that helps. And then the next doctor does the same thing. It's different tests, different doctors, different prescriptions, but it's the same song and dance because they are all operating under the same limitations. Everyone is doing their job, but no one's actually stopping and looking at the big picture. And because each individual step looks reasonable in isolation, it's really hard to see this pattern while you're stuck inside it. But this is the piece that nobody talks about, that doctors don't actually get paid for thinking time. That just let that sit for a minute. That's crazy. They're only paid for actions. They're not reimbursed for sitting with complexity, reviewing timelines, connecting patterns across multiple specialties, or God forbid, going off and doing research onto educating themselves about conditions they may not have full awareness of that could be what's on the table with you. If they want to do it, it's going to come out of their own personal time, most likely. And so that's why, even when you have really good or very caring providers, they're working inside of constraints that make the depth that you need almost impossible. Which means when you show up with a complicated story, the system is not going to slow down to meet you. If anything, it speeds up to just push you along. And it's not because your case is too complicated, but it's because the for-profit U.S. healthcare system of today can't afford your complexity. So then what happens? Well, symptoms don't get resolved. More of them pop up. But then another issue pops up. At some point, the healthcare system, your basket of providers that you've now collected, runs out of ideas before your body stops sending signals that there's an issue. And when that gap opens, responsibility quietly shifts onto the patient. And you start hearing things like, we've done everything we can. Your tests are normal. There's nothing concerning here. And if nothing obvious explains what's happening, the unspoken, or sometimes said out loud conclusion becomes, maybe it's you. Maybe it's in your head. Maybe it's stress. Maybe it's anxiety. And that's when people start shrinking. Second guessing yourself, minimizing symptoms, or accepting labels that don't actually explain anything, not because you're weak, but because you're trying to survive inside of a system that isn't even built to finish the job. Let me give you a concrete example. I worked with a client who went from completely functioning, capable working adult to nearly bedridden within just a few months. And she had been to multiple providers, had a slew of tests that, of course, all came up normal, multiple specialists, some medications to just see if it helped, and nothing added up. What finally changed things for her wasn't some fancy test or a new medication off the line. It was time. Time to lay everything out. Time to notice the details that didn't fit, the overlooked gaps in her care, the red flags that others had ignored as they were busy attending the more drastic issues. Time to recognize which symptoms mattered clinically and which ones were just noise. In fact, during our initial consultation, there was one small detail that had come up that could have been dismissed as irrelevant, but given the context of everything else that we talked about in that time, it actually ended up changing the entire direction of her care. And none of her providers were incompetent, but none of them had the capacity to take the time to go into the level of depth that was required to solve her mystery and get her that diagnosis of the very rare disease that she actually had. That's the gap. The problem is not that you haven't tried hard enough. The problem is that the healthcare system is optimized for acute problems, clear emergencies, and single system or very common issues. And you are asking it to solve a mystery. Mysteries require time, synthesis, and strategy. Those are not built into routine care. So if you're still sick it's not because you failed. It's because the system was never designed for people like you. And when people don't understand this, they often will do one of three things. Either straight up blame themselves, keep hopping doctors hoping this time something will be different, or give up and just learn to live a smaller life. And not only is that just so sad and so painful to hear of, but this isn't even a small subset of people. In fact, it's estimated that over 1 million Americans each year are permanently harmed by missed or delayed diagnosis. So this has incredible life-altering impacts. So this is what I want you to walk away with today. It is not your job to fight harder or louder inside a broken system that was never set up to serve you. It is your job to recognize that that system itself is the problem, not you. Because once you see that, then everything changes. And you can stop asking, what am I doing wrong? And you can start asking, what kind of thinking is missing here? That question is where your momentum will start to come from. So over the next few episodes, I'm going to walk you through exactly where this breaks down inside of real medical conversations, starting with the moment that most people lose influence without realizing it. Because once you can see that moment, you can stop internalizing it and you can know what to do about it. And that matters more than any test result. So if you take only one thing from this today, let it be this. If you are still sick, it is not an accident. It is a predictable outcome of a system that was never built to solve mysteries. And it's not your fault. We will help you start looking in the right direction. I'll see you in the next one.